thank you for joining us here today. I know we're in a really busy week right before reading week, so between today's event, between the descriptions that we'll put on our website, between answering questions now, all to say that I hope we can get the whole school the information that you're looking for about our summer courses. I think I know you and have had the pleasure of meeting many of you, but my name is Peter Seeley and I'm the director of the Undergraduate Architectural Studies program. Last week, we had an information session about a summer course for undergraduate students called ARC 495, and it's known by the acronym DRIP, which is the Daniels Research Internship Program. Information about that is up on our website as well, because I know that DRIP might be something that's especially of interest to third and fourth year undergraduate students. Today, together with two really great colleagues, we're going to give you an overview of two other courses. So we have ARC 300, the Design Build Studio. We're offering two really amazing design builds that are going to take place here in Toronto on the U of T campus. Professor Humby Song is going to present a really fantastic project that she's going to lead. And then I'm going to give you a bit of a description of Nicholas Hoban's Design Build Studio. Nicholas is actually traveling in Europe with Daniel students right now. So I'm going to give you a short overview. And then on the website, we'll have more information. And after reading week, we'll get Nicholas to give a presentation and to be able to answer questions from you. So those are the two design build options. And then we have three ARC 300 studies abroad options. Those are courses that travel to another country. I'll be leading one in Berlin, Germany. Professor John Schneer is going to present a really fantastic course that he's going to lead in Rome, Italy. And we have a third really amazing studies abroad that's going to take place in Switzerland. I'm going to present that. It's going to be led by an incredibly talented architect here in Toronto who has over a decade's experience working in Switzerland. The architect who's leading the course is going to give a presentation on it after we get back from the reading week. So I know this, I'm doing my best to make it sound really mysterious and really amazing. And you'll get more information about it after reading week. But I just want to make sure that all the options are in your mind. So two really great design studios and three really great travel courses. To get us started, I'm going to ask Humby Song to come up and present her design build studio. And again, this is the ARC 395 course code. Humby.
Cool. Thank you for the lovely introduction. Okay, we're up. Can you hear me okay? Yes? That's the best way. Okay. Okay, so yeah, I'm offering one of the two design build courses. I'll also give a shout out to Nicholas's, which is also amazing. My design build is called Responsive Architecture, and it's an iteration of the design build that I also taught last year. So, you know, we've kind of figured out some of the foundations. So I'm really excited because that means you guys will get the benefit of a lot of the equipment we've already amassed, a lot of the knowledge, things like that. So, some of the key themes that we'll be discussing in the class has to do with trying to rethink technology as not just something existing out in the cloud, but rather something actually quite spatial. It takes form, there's data centers, and also something quite social in the way that it mediates the way you interact with each other, with other humans, other groups of people, and also the way it mediates interactions with other technologies. And so we'll be, at the end of the course, be dealing with creating spatial architectural scale installations, like slightly pavilion scale, but indoors, that deal with a lot of these themes, like human-machine interaction, mediation, spatial feedback, feedback loops, experience and phenomenology, always mess up how to pronounce that, and ultimately responsive environments. And so if I often frame this in kind of two ways. So we're going to be both dealing with the subject of computation embedded in the built environment that you experience through your body, because the body is also an interface, And then also computation embedded in the tools that you're using to design those things. CAD, Rhino, Blender, AI, Touch Designer, things like that. And I'll skip over this kind of quickly, but one of the central concepts that this course will be dealing with is this idea of embodied cognition. This is a frequent theme for many of my courses, but having to do with sort of the concept that interacting with tools change the way we think and perceive, so on and so forth. And so this idea of the body as being part of the knowledge production, of experience making, that's the human body is a very important concern in this class. And so a little peek at last year's works through both Summer Design Build and the ARC 480 involves like a lot of these interactive responsive projects by these student groups. So for instance, it's Inflation Pavilion, where the longer you stay and converse with other people, the more the canopy gradually rises, and you can see a little examples of such drawings, and there's a lot of attention to fabrication. So it's a design build, so it's just physically how to get things to fasten together and be stable when people are jostling it. Other such examples, unfolding, so so all of these actually had to do with the theme of doorways and thresholds, which is why you see these kind of projects. And so these transformable walls that are transforming a wall into doorway, some drawings, how things come together and how some of the computation is embedded. Another such project, Vessels of Memory, that had to do with these sort of architectural fragments or just objects we have in the home holding a sense of like memory of prior inhabitants, and they created this really lovely experience of like walking you through carrying one such vessel of memory and placing it on the shelf. Other such similar scale work, but done as part of the ARC 480, not the design build, but we'll be able to play with all of these tools and make such things as well. Anyway, so intimate, cozy spaces, really trying to create a sensory experience for the human body. Am I close to time? Oh, we're good? Okay. And maybe some of the other elements might be emphasis on how some of the spaces you build or the pavilions you build are responsive to people. And so, like, for instance, your gestures, your human body pose, things like that might create changes to the physical environment real time. And all of these might sound complicated, but I'm not requiring any prior experience with these sort of tools or physical computing. All of these, I'll tell you a little more about it. Oh, here you go. Yeah, so all of this information is extremely well documented online, lots of tutorials, and we will have some scaffolded assignments in the early days to get you up and running. And I believe that in the last design build, maybe like 2 students had prior knowledge, and it was totally fine. So I just want to emphasize, like, don't be scared off by the inclusion of some of these. And then the other thing that we will be teaching through tutorials will be various interactive software such as Touch Designer, which we're going to make reactive to a bunch of things. So it might be sensing people, it might be sensing temperature, climate change, like changes in temperature, things like that. Actually, a little example student project where, okay, my videos are not working too well. One sec. Okay, I'll just, oh, there you go. So to give one example from Daniel's students, kind of creating this responsive netting structure that changes based on whether it's just experienced by one person or if there's a second person who comes on. Again, dealing with the idea of like technology as a social mediator, sometimes playfully, sometimes subversively. So where will this take place? We'll be doing it right here at Daniel's. We'll be able to make use of the amazing fabrication facilities here, and then we're gonna pack it all up in a U-Haul, drive it over to Markham, which is in Greater Toronto area. And so, So there's a little peek of the exhibit. So at the very final weekend, that Saturday, Sunday of the 3-week course, we'll have a public exhibit. So this is us after the U-Haul install, prep for the opening. Then there's going to be an opening party. You can invite, I mean, it's open to the public, so also just random strangers come in, but also you can invite your friends and family. And so a little peek of that. So anyway, so it also, the hope with this is that you get a lot of practice explaining your project to people who are somewhat familiar with our discipline and also people who have absolutely no idea what you're up to. So yeah, so just reiterating, you don't have to have any prior experience, and in the past, the vast majority of my students did not. But if you do have experience, you know, it's probably helpful for me to know. So please make a note in the application. It's helpful in that I can kind of scaffold the levels of assignments. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Humby. I hope the presentation has given you an idea of some of the things that make a design build really special. First of all, the chance to not just design something, but to build it and to learn by putting it together. Secondly, the chance to learn a new tool, in fact, a whole bunch of new software in a really great learning environment in summer with people working with you every day to show you. And then finally, the chance to have this really, really cool object that you construct that then goes on display. I'm just going to plug in my computer. I'm going to present Professor Nicholas Hoban's design build option. Great. So Professor Nicholas Hoban, who many of you know as our Director of Technology here at Daniels, who also teaches many courses in the undergraduate program, is once again leading a design build that's centered around robotics. Professor Hoban has done this for the last 2 summers with really fantastic outcomes. So Robot Made 2024, this really beautiful object that was displayed behind the Daniels Pavilion. And last year, Professor Hoban led a group to make a geodesic dome that is designed by you, the students, and then it's fabricated using our KUKA robotic arm here at Daniels. We will get you a full description on our website. We'll also find a moment after reading week when Professor Hoban is back. Again, he's traveling with Daniels students right now. I'm going to give you a brief overview, and obviously to have me kind of reading something is not going to give you the full energy or the full picture. But the work is really amazing, and as with Humby Song's design build, this is also an opportunity for you to get to learn a lot about using new technology and new tools. This year's version is called Coding the Column, Robotic Fabrication of Variable Column Assemblies Through Discrete Elements. And what this means, is that, just gotta go back here. What this means is that, and here actually I want to make sure, Humby, did you give the dates for your design build? Okay, so you were late May and early June? So both design builds will confirm the dates, but are taking place from the end of May until the start of June. I have the specific dates for Nicholas Hoban's, 25 May to 12 June. In a couple of days on our website, we'll make sure we have Humby's dates, but they're likely to be very similar. As the title suggests, this year's version of Nicholas Hoban's design build is going to look at the column, one of the essential parts of architecture. I believe this year they are shifting from a wood assembly to a brick assembly, but again using the KUKA robotic arm that we have here. The idea is that students will work to design different column assemblies or different designs for columns, which can then be built using the robot arm and will then be brought together into a single structure and final fabrication. Among the things you'll get out of this studio are the chance to learn software for dealing with wood and other structural assemblies, different facets of rhinoceros, of rhino, to actually plan these out, and then the software that actually allows you to take your design out of Rhino and then to test it and to fabricate it using the KUKA robotic arm. So you get a lot of experience with scripting and with digital fabrication. The course will be taught, as I mentioned, by Nicholas Hoban, but it's in collaboration with Aryan Reze-Rad, who's a professor at the Faculty of Engineering at the University of Toronto. And a really special thing about this course is it brings together Daniel students. It's almost entirely Daniel students, but we always have a few engineering students as well. And it makes for a great collaborative process. Again, we'll organize a moment after the reading week where Nick Hoban can stand on stage and do a much better job explaining this. What I can say is it's always amazing to see the work that comes out of Humvees and that comes out of Nicholas's design builds. And it's a really fantastic opportunity to add something that you might not get in most of your courses at Daniels. This now brings me to our 3 travel options, ARC 300. As I mentioned, we're going to finish with Professor John Schneer talking about Rome. In a few minutes, I'm going to present my Berlin summer course, but I'm going to start, and again, I'm trying to make this sound as mysterious and magical as possible because it is mysterious and a bit magical. We're going to start with the third of our travel courses, which is called Say Swiss, an Elemental Portrait. This course is going to be led by an incredibly talented local architect with a studio in Toronto. This person has amazing experience working in Switzerland with Herzog de Meuron. As program director, I'm not allowed to say this person's name until the whole university contractual process is completed. So you can imagine, you get back from reading week, I hope I can make you really interested in this, and then you'll get the full information about the person who's leading it, and you'll be able to hear that person explain it. But as I said, bless you, as I said, I want to make sure that as you're thinking about this over reading week, you've got a full picture of who's going to be, of what the options are. As the title suggests, Say Swiss is going to involve travel to Switzerland for 19 days. The dates are set for 6th August to 24th August, so during the month of August. The idea, as the subtitle suggests, an elemental portrait, is you're going to spend your days visiting architecture offices in Switzerland, and especially going with Swiss architects to visit buildings in Switzerland. An elemental portrait means that each student will choose an element of architecture: the door, the window, the corner, the roof, the elevator, the staircase, the internal wall. And they're going to study it really closely across a whole series of buildings. The idea being, by looking really closely at one part of architecture, by studying many different examples, but that are really well built in an inventive way, you'll gain a lot of confidence as a designer, and you'll get actually a much better idea about how buildings are designed and built and put together. The preliminary itinerary involves the early part of the course spending a lot of time in Basel and Zurich, these 2 big major cities in Switzerland, both hotbeds of architecture. Basel is home to Herzog de Meuron. We have already set up a visit to the Herzog de Meuron offices to meet with people there. Basel also home to Diener and Diener and Christ and Gantenbein and all sorts of great firms, and also it's just a really amazing place with a lot of architecture to look at in a really concentrated way. And then the second part of the trip is going to move through some of the rural and mountainous parts of Switzerland to go see works by Peter Zumthor, by Valerio Olgiati, by other really amazing firms. And again, I think this is probably the most professional design build we've offered, in the sense that it's all of our travel is always to look at architecture and buildings. This one is to really look incredibly closely at works of hyper-contemporary architecture, which again will include seeing works like Hortus by Herzog de Meuron, seeing the Yellow House by Valerio Olgiati, seeing Peter Merkley's La Congiunta in Ticino, going to Peter Zumthor's Terme Vals. This is a really inadequate presentation of what's going to be an amazing course, but I hope I can plant the idea of going to see Swiss architects and to hear people working in architecture in Switzerland take you to see really amazing buildings in Switzerland. And that your particular work in this course, in the end, students will each produce a booklet charting one element of architecture across many different buildings. So you can imagine the students coming back will have a presentation in Toronto in September with all this documentation of different parts of buildings. The whole project is really inspired from Rem Koolhaas's Elements of Architecture research from the Venice Biennale a few years ago, except it'll be focusing on these amazing recent Swiss buildings. The approximate cost, so whereas with the design builds, you pay tuition, and there might be a small materials fee, but the cost is, we have to be honest about this, that the cost of the travel studios is high, and the design builds, it's very modest. So the design builds, the cost to you is the tuition, and otherwise there might be a minimal materials fee. Obviously the design builds, the studies abroad, you're paying for your travel and your accommodation and your food and your expenses while you're there. The preliminary budget, and actually it's quite a serious budget, for the 3 weeks travel in Switzerland is 5,974 Canadian dollars. That includes airfare, food, accommodation, local transport, and all the things you're going to do in Switzerland, but it doesn't include your tuition. Depending upon whether you're a graduate student or an undergraduate student, the way tuition works for summer courses is different. The registrar's office can fill you in on exactly how this works. I always hesitate to say it on the stage here, just because I don't want to make a mistake. But essentially, you've got your tuition that's separate, and then the cost for Say Swiss is $5,974, and that includes your airfare, your food, your accommodation, your local transport, and all the things you'll do in Switzerland. This now brings me to the second Studies Abroad course, which is entitled Berlin, a City in Film. I'm really tempted just to give the microphone to Max, because he did this last year. And I'll note the students who traveled to Berlin before, and there are quite a lot of them in the school, I think are the very best people who can tell you about the course and what's good about it and what's bad about it, and whether you think you would enjoy doing it or not. The theme of this course is that we've got a city, Berlin. There are tons and tons and tons of films that are set in Berlin. The image of Berlin, just like Hong Kong or Los Angeles or New York, has really been constructed through films. And so we are going to go explore and try to learn about the city through films and through filmmaking. What that means is that by day, we'll be visiting all sorts of things in the city. We'll be going to visit new buildings, to visit old buildings, to visit museums, to visit neighborhoods, to meet with different people. And then every evening, we go to a local cinema to watch a film that's set in Berlin. The assignment for the course, and there are a couple of assignments, but the major one is to work with local filmmakers to make your own 16 millimeter analog film, working in a group. And the course always ends on the last night in Berlin with everyone gathered together watching the films that we've made in the city. So again, many of you know me, but others might not. This is a picture of me flying to Berlin 2 years ago. I also realized that I used to teach a second-year course, so I got to know everyone that way. Now I'm teaching a first-year course, so many of the second years might not know me as well as I'd like. I'm a historian. I write a lot about the way buildings and cities are represented in films and photographs and novels. This is going to be the fourth iteration of the course. So we went in 2023, 2024, and 2025. And as a historian, when I'm not teaching, I spend a lot of time writing about the relationship between film and cities. For instance, this essay that I wrote about the way the Berlin Wall shows up in films. The itinerary in Berlin is always completely jam-packed, trying to see as many things as possible, including going up the dome of Norman Foster's Reichstag building, seeing the Karl Marx Allee, the first street of socialism built in the 1950s, exploring buildings like the Staatsratsgebäude, the former seat of the East German government, seeing the Fernsehturm, East Berlin's iconic television tower, which is kind of a symbol of the former East Germany, visiting Peter Eisenman's memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe, seeing the rebuilt Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church, which was always the symbol of West Berlin during the Cold War, and seeing Katie Kollwitz's Mother with Dead Son sculpture at Germany's memorial to the victims of war and tyranny, which is in a 19th century building by Karl Friedrich Schinkel. Misha Ullmann's empty library on Bebelplatz is a very, very moving memorial to the book burnings from 1933 under the Nazis. Seeing remnants and the absence of the Berlin Wall that divided the city of Berlin between 1961 and 1989. We visit the archives of the Stasi, the former East German secret police. And we get this amazing tour through the former Tempelhof Airport, this massive, massive airport building that's now largely empty in Berlin, and which Berliners have turned into a really amazing public park. As I mentioned, we go to watch films almost every evening we're in Berlin. Sometimes these are at open-air cinemas. What you're seeing on screen is actually, it's a screening of a 1927 film called Berlin's Symphony of a Metropolis. But the guys in the DJ booth there are two electronic musicians called Trondheim, and they perform live electronic music while we're watching this film from 1927. It's really, really amazing. And we also go to lots of tiny local independent cinemas to watch films that are set in Berlin. We also have special screenings in people's apartments. We work with these really great local filmmakers who teach you how to make films with the 16mm cameras, and they also have a special evening where they play films for us. Other sites we visit include the Olympiastadion, home of the 1936 Berlin Olympics. In total, you'll end up watching about 16 full-length films before and during our time in Berlin, and we'll study Berlin's history and its spaces through the way they appear in film. Often we'll go somewhere during the day, and then you'll see it in a movie that we're watching in the evening. Now, where will you stay? You'll stay at a student residence that is owned and operated by New York University. So New York University has a program in Berlin, and they own a residence which is actually in a really famous building. So this complex is called the Kreuzberg Tower. It was built by the American architect John Haydock in the 1980s. New York University owns part of it, and that's where we stay. And it's really good because you have kitchen and laundry facilities there. They have 24-hour security. There's a staff there to help you out. They're really, really good at welcoming the students to Berlin. And our students last year were very happy staying at NYU Berlin. We'll take day trips to places like Potsdam to see Erich Mendelssohn's Einstein Tower. We'll also see a lot of Carl Friedrich Schinkel's buildings as well. In Potsdam, it's kind of Germany's Hollywood, where the film industry is. And we'll go to Dessau to see the famous Bauhaus, the former design school in its building built by Walter Gropius in the 1920s. How do we get the energy to do all of this? For me, it's drinking coffee and what Germans call Schokocroissant. But basically, out of respect for the city of Berlin, and also out of respect for you and the cost and all the efforts you're putting into it, we really have a very full itinerary. The assignments are meant as a different series of experiments to introduce you and to reflect upon Berlin. Some of them are individual, some of them are in small groups. There's actually one assignment that all the students on the group do together. I'm less interested, I'm interested in what you do, but for me, the really beautiful thing is what the group can do together. So the assignments include filmmaking with local filmmakers, with an 8mm camera and with a 16mm camera. And I really like the idea of inviting students to experiment with a medium they probably haven't used before. And it's similar with the design builds. Why do we make analog films? It's partly to actually make you do something that you can't just erase. So you have to kind of get help from experts and then commit to doing something, and then it's an experiment, and you actually have to wait about a week to see how it turned out. Also gives us a really interesting perspective to compare to our contemporary digital techniques. It also will make you see Berlin through a lens, so to speak. In other words, you get used to seeing how the city appears through a camera. Other activities explore analog photography, so we're going to work with the architectural photographer James Britton, who's a Canadian architectural photographer. He's going to come with us for part of the trip to do film photography with you and some darkroom printing. We also have a printmaking exercise. And we'll spend a day with these two fantastic architects, Jonathan Janssens and Jennifer O'Donnell of Plattenbau Studio. And the whole group will work together to make one big drawing that's documenting a neighborhood. We'll meet the author, Musa Okwonga, and we'll actually be reading his little book about Berlin called In the End, It Was All About Love. And then finally, you'll document your time in Berlin through a series of postcards. Travel dates will be July 27th to Sunday, August 16th. And we'll meet online before we travel to discuss it's not a heavy, but just to discuss some readings and some films that we'll watch before we go. You'll read two books, Musa Okwonga's In the End, It Was About Love, and Brian Ladd's The Ghosts of Berlin, and we'll read these things slowly and we'll talk about them, but it's just to kind of give you a kind of basic introduction to Berlin. The cost is approximately 5,900 Canadian, includes your airfare, your accommodation at NYU Berlin, the local transport while we're there, the entrance fees to get into museums and films, the workshops. It includes the film that you're going to shoot and the rental of the cameras and the paper that we're going to print your photographs on and the time with the filmmakers, as well as your meals in Berlin. The one thing that's excluded from that are your tuition fees. Each of the courses has an application. Instructions are up or will be up on the website. You can totally ask questions. You can send me an email. I can help you with any of these. For the Berlin course, we ask you to watch the film Wings of Desire by Wim Wenders and to make 3 postcards where you tell me, who are you? What did you think about this film? And you can totally tell me you hated it and why. That would be great, just to see what kind of questions a film would raise, and then for you to say why you want to go to Berlin. And these are due on Wednesday, March 4th at 9 a.m. The reason why we put the deadline at 9 a.m., and please tell everyone, is we know there's always someone, their computer crashes, there's always someone, the website isn't working, and this way the Daniels Registrar's Office and the Programs Office will be open, so there'll be people here to help you. In previous years, we were really silly. It was my fault. We put the deadline at midnight, and so we got all these emails from people at like 1 a.m. So this time the deadline is at a time when Daniels is actually open so people can help you. On that note, I'm going to ask John Schneer to come up and to present his Rome summer course.
This kind of selection process, so I probably should figure out how to do that.
You'll just see instructions will be on the website.
Okay.
And do you want this or the handout?
I don't know yet. Here, I'll take them both, just in case. Hey, everybody. Maybe it is easier. Can you hear me? Okay, so I do know some of you. If I've taught you before in an undergraduate seminar earlier this year or perhaps last year. I did send a message out to some of the graduate students who I know who may or want to travel with us to go to Rome. The name of this studio, is Rome. I think that Peter made me translate it. My Italian is not great, but I prefer the Italian title because of the subtleties in the translation. Incontri in tempo, which really means either rendezvous in time, but I kind of like the idea of encounters in time. And the reason I've called it that, and the reason that I even go to Rome, is for those people who are not initiated or studied Rome at all. My interest in Rome is mainly through this idea of palimpsest. And in this photograph, the people who kind of just traveled to Rome, or if you've gone to Rome before with your parents or on a kind of general trip through Europe, you show up in Rome. You go into the center, you check out the Roman Forum and the Colosseum, and you say, well, this place is full of old buildings. And it's just, most people can't distinguish, what building might be 2,000 years old, what building might be 1,800 years old. But in fact, the great thing about Rome and the interesting thing about Rome is that at one glance, you see over 2,000 years of accumulated layers that have developed and occurred and accrued in a physical environment. So even in this image here, which is kind of viewing over the Roman Forum, we can actually see parts of buildings that were in Roman times, parts of buildings that were in the medieval times, and parts of buildings that were in the Baroque. And Rome is essentially a Baroque city overlaid on a medieval city with kind of bits and pieces of fragments of Roman architecture and ruins scattered throughout. And it's a city that's built on many, many layers. And I'm interested in this kind of notion of the kind of simultaneity of Rome as a kind of phenomena. And I think to understand Rome as a kind of exercise in lamination and delamination kind of qualifies it to be a kind of experience of something quite contemporary conceptually. This quote, let us suppose that Rome is not a place, but rather a psychical entity, which is with a similarly long and rich past. Bonus marks for anybody who knows whose quote that is. Anybody know whose quote this is? Peter, do you know whose quote this is? No, but you got the right part of the... No, not Goethe. It's Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud, some of you may know, was the kind of grandfather of psychotherapy. And I don't, this is not a kind of apology for Sigmund Freud. He's also a kind of controversial person for his particularly often biased views and misogyny and all these other things. But the guy was a thinker, and his kind of idea was that why he was interested in Rome is he kind of believed that the human psyche, the human mind, is kind of created as we grow older out of a kind of an assembly of experiences. And that the assembly of experiences, they're all there all at once. And of course, depending on your memory, maybe you can recall some more than others, some that are more recent, maybe some that are profound from your past or particularly sentimental. He wasn't interested so much in the kind of, the kind of idea of memory kind of as a set of kind of conditions, but rather that it was all there, that's all there. And that psychotherapy is a kind of process by which these layers of your psychic being can be accessed through various forms of conversation and exercises. And so, to me, Rome is a city that is not just something that we can kind of identify these things through constantly being in the presence of fragments and kind of amazing fragments that are kind of layered one on top of each other, but rather that we can actually see these simultaneously and that we can be immersed in it. We can, because Rome is a city that one really feels when one is wandering around in Rome, that it envelops you, right? It's not so much a city that you look at, and although it's full of monuments and individual things, it really is, for me, a city that you kind of wear, especially if you're going for longer than, a typical 5 or 6 day stop on a kind of touristic tour of Rome. So, in a way, going to Rome, I always ask students to ask this question: are we not modern? How can we look at Rome not as a kind of a lesson in history, even though there's a ton of history to be understood or learned or experienced, but at what point can we observe these things and say, well, in fact, there's a kind of moment where we can kind of see things which are kind of radically different or even iconoclastic, given the history of at least Western architecture. And here I am. So a little bit about me for those of you who don't know me. My name is John Schneer. Probably been the longest continuously teaching professor here at Daniels. I might be the oldest now, but I'm not sure. Maybe Rob Bright and I might be around the same age. But I'm not, but I'm a kind of amateur teacher. I have a practice. It's not called Studio KSA, but used to be known as Co-Engineer Architects. We've had a practice in Toronto for quite a long time. And generally speaking, I teach in the program. I have taught all over in the program, but generally speaking, I've taught courses having to deal with and looking at kind of conceptual phenomena and how we can kind of look at that to develop our kind of own kind of critical iterative process that which can be applied to any kind of project or any kind of mode of thinking that you might participate in through a creative life. This little sculpture here is kind of an amazing example of something which, we would not think of as the product of, some kind of old-fashioned thinking. It's a sculpture of a little elephant, largely attributed to the workshop of the great Baroque sculptor and architect Bernini. And sitting on top of it is an Egyptian obelisk, something that's several thousand years older than the elephant itself. This kind of combination of elements, placed specifically in the, by a pope. right? So there's a kind of a weird assemblage to kind of mark this place in Rome. But what's really interesting is the kind of narrative of the elephant itself. And here I am talking to a group of people, someone taking my picture without my permission, and then posting it somewhere that I found. But I'm talking about one thing. I'm talking about this kind of, what is this weird little elephant doing? What does an elephant have to do with the iconography of this city? And why is the elephant's trunk so long, right? So these kind of little hidden things that are kind of mysterious make me think that there's someone who is creating this piece is not thinking about reproducing an elephant to be put here. There's something larger, more than meets the eye. So the thing about going to Rome is that it's like a really, really crowded place. There is no low season in Rome. It's normally speaking, I've taken maybe a dozen students to Rome at a time, and there we're kind of challenged to kind of march through the city together, but I have done that. In this trip, we're going to have a different strategy, assuming that we have a full cohort of students, which as I understand it is going to be somewhere between 20 and 24 students in my case. So we're going to take a different approach. And that approach means that rather than having a super heavy itinerary where every morning we're going to get up and meet, and I'm going to march you through the city to show you the millions and millions of sites, that our itinerary is going to be a little bit looser. And much of the time, at least half of the time, we're going to have kind of some kind of combination of rendezvous, meetups, and then a lot of time for you to kind of work on a project that I'm going to set for the group. Having said that, we are going to have some pretty interesting kind of times together. And it's going to be hard for like 24 of us to sit down and have pizza together, but you will be able to kind of do this in smaller groups. Although our itinerary does include a welcome dinner and a farewell dinner that is going to be organized for all of us on the first and the last night of the program. So that is going to be taken care of here. You know, if I leave this slide on for a little while, you can see there are kind of a number of kind of intentionally presented as a series of fragments. In a way, after your first 4 or 5 days in Rome, what is going to seem like a kind of mysterious, very confusing city to move through, especially for those of you who haven't been, you'll actually figure it out pretty quickly. And you will experience Rome as this kind of set of kind of continuous fragments. There are many, many incredible things that we're going to do together, but then there are many things that I'm going to leave it up to you to do and figure out how to do on your own. We're not going to be going, for example, to the Sistine Chapel together. Here, there's actually a picture here of me giving a little lecture in front of the School of Athens fresco by Raphael in the Stanza de Raphael, which is like 2 rooms before you get to the Sistine Chapel in Rome. But there's no way that I'm going to lead 25 people through the Vatican Museum. It's just not a pleasant experience. So when you go, I suggest you go in small groups, make your own plans, and to that extent, there'll be some things, for example, the Colosseum and the Roman Forum themselves. These are things that to lead you through these things would be kind of uncomfortable and tedious. It's much better for you to go and do them in smaller groups, do them on your own time. There are other things that are much more we get much more benefit from doing them together. Some things which you wouldn't get access to if you were there on your own, and we will do those things together. We're also, even though you're going to have a lot of time, I am going to take you to 2 places outside of Rome, 2 day trips. One will be to the Umbrian hill town of Orvieto, where we're going to go see a couple of amazing things. One of them is the something called the Pozzo di San Pangrazio, which is an amazing carved out of tufa, out of the solid rock, a double helic ramp down to a well that was built by a pope who was going to flee to Orvieto to withstand a siege during one of the sacks of Rome. And then there's one of the most beautiful European cathedrals that happens to be in Orvieto, and we'll be seeing that. And then we'll also be spending a day in Tivoli, where we'll go see the Villa d'Este, these incredible Renaissance gardens and villa, which was designed as a kind of allegory to Rome by a nobleman, Renaissance nobleman who really desperately wanted to become a pope, and tried to kind of seduce people who would have been voting for popes by creating a kind of allegorical landscape. And we'll also be visiting Hadrian's Villa, which is a kind of remarkable collection of Roman ruins of a villa that preceded the Renaissance one by 1,500 years or so. That's not in the mountains outside of Tivoli. And that here is a kind of overview of Hadrian's Villa, which kind of serves to kind of introduce again the nature of the project, which is encounters in time, but also another important theme, and that is to say triumph of the fragment, which is a way to say that for me, the idea of the pieces and fragments of an idea are for me often more interesting and are more fecund and more have more potential in them than the idea of the whole. And Rome is a great city, as I said, to kind of take a look at fragments and to kind of assemble fragments and celebrate the space between the fragments. Think of it as a puzzle that doesn't fit perfectly together, where the spaces in between the pieces are as important, if not more important, than the pieces themselves. The project will be done in groups, hopefully of 3, and you'll be assigned, or maybe we can do it by kind of drawing out of a hat, a series of individual elements in Rome, which will become your subject of study. And these will things that you'll get before we go to Rome. Some of the things in this image include very contemporary things like one of Zaha Hadid's first major commissions, which is called the Maxi Forum, which is a museum of design in Rome. Then we have a couple of what are euphemistically called fascist buildings in Rome. The Square Colosseum, beautiful building, which is now a foundation for Fendi, the fashion house. And then the Stadio di Marmo, which is one of the Mussolini constructed amazing outdoor arenas that were part of the earlier and later Rome Olympics. The train station, the Termini, which is an incredible building. And then on the other side of the ledger, you have fragments of Rome, like one of the Roman bridges, original Roman bridges, which is actually just remaining as a kind of fragment. Another kind of fragment, the Porta of Octavia, and then kind of more whole buildings, like the Tempietto by Bramante, one of the only purely Renaissance structures in Rome, the Castello Sant'Angelo, which again has got many layers on it. This is not the Colosseum, but it has a very similar iconography. This is the Theater of Marcellus, which started out as a Roman theater, but now has apartment buildings built on top of it. And then we can go through the other ones later. One of them isn't a building at all, but it's rather Testaccio, which is a hill made up of terracotta jar fragments that were piled up over the centuries at the Roman port of Porta Portesi, which is the river port of Rome. Each group will be given, or as I said, will be assigned, or will have one of these fragments, and you'll be making a kind of drawing through time, probably using video, that will imagine the past, present, and speculative future of these sites in a kind of plausible fiction. Yes, films. Film is something that I've been using for a long time in my studios. These are 3 successive stills from a former student of mine that she created for her thesis. And it will be using whatever techniques you want to use in order to kind of create this kind of, I call it a kinesthetic drawing more than I call it a film, but you'll be able to use kind of various techniques that you talk about, and you'll kind of decide how to make it. I was thinking, but I'm not sure, that at the same time, I think it would be really great to kind of make the film within the film. And that is to say, not only have each group document this kind of plausible fiction based on this fragment that they choose or they get assigned, but also to do a kind of documentation of that experience of making the film in Rome in a way that might have us not even believe that we're in Rome. How is that possible? Well, I think it's possible. And so an example of what I might be talking about is this film by Jacques Tati from 1967 called Playtime. I'm sure that Peter Seeley has seen it 100 times. And you might want to all watch it tonight. It's an amazing film. I'm not going to say too much about it, except that it's supposed to represent Paris. And it includes groups of tourists who get off tour buses believing that they're going to be seeing all the famous sites in Paris. And instead, they're in this 1960s utopian modernist set that they fully kind of accept as Paris. And there are these wonderful little moments in the film. My favorite one is this woman who's gotten out of the bus up here, and she's wandering into the lobby of this building, which is a museum in a kind of modernist 60s building, where the pieces are displayed as if they're in a department store, the fragments. But as she opens the door, there's a reflection in the glass door of the Eiffel Tower. You know, it's kind of an amazing moment to kind of remind you, or to remind the viewer that it's Paris. And it's this connection between the expectation of what one might kind of expect and the gap between what the reality might be, that is the reality of this film, is that space is what I'm really interested in. And I want you guys to kind of explore that potential space while you're in Rome. So on the one of the famous Noli maps of Rome, I'm going to kind of show you where we're going to be, kind of stationed. The round circle is around the Campo dei Fiori, which is in the heart of Rome. And the three dots are apartment sites where right now I'm working on finding housing. So the idea for the housing is that you'll stay in apartments, maybe 4 to apartment, in some cases maybe as many as 8 to an apartment, but it's really one of the only ways we can keep costs down in Rome and affordable. So we're just working out that now, and we're working with another institution, actually 2 other institutions. University of Washington Rome Center has an amazing facility in the middle of Rome, right on the Campo dei Fiori. So this is the area that we're going to have studio space in. And it's right here is the bigger picture. And you can kind of see its relationship to the major monuments of Rome, like the Piazza Navona, the Pantheon, the Trevi Fountain is over here. This is the ancient heart of Rome, looking very different in Noli's time than it does now, of course. And then this is the palazzo that University of Washington has just off the Campo dei Fiori, and we will have studio space, access to library, access to facilities there. And while we are paying for studio space for maybe 6 days scattered throughout our trip for us to meet, you will have access to their administration, and you will have access to a lounge and to a library where you can go anytime as part of our trip and hang out there to meet your group members if you don't want to meet in a cafe or back at the apartment. I presume it's going to be, quite comfortable. That's the terrace overlooking the Campo dei Fiori. These are the kinds of rooms that we'll be meeting in. And then I've also made arrangements with Temple University, who has a fine arts program, study abroad program there, and we'll be doing a one-day printmaking workshop where everybody's going to get to make monotypes, again, related to the themes that you develop for your project. Because the class is so big, or I'm anticipating the class is too big, is big, we'll have it over 2 days on a Saturday and a Sunday, where we will meet, and there'll be a kind of morning session of learning how to do it, and then an afternoon session of printmaking. That's a print I made when I was in Rome, monotype. So this roughly gives you an idea of how the schedule is going to work. And I might say that right now, it's a toss-up whether I start on the 20th, which is a Wednesday, or the Wednesday before, which is the 13th. But the idea is 22 nights. So if you come to Rome before that time, or you want to say after, you'll have to find alternative accommodations. But while we're there, your accommodations will be taken care of. And you can kind of see, this is a list of tours. Most of them, for the most part, will only take us into half a day, and then you're on your own to go and explore the city, go to some alternative places that we won't be going to. And I'll get more into the details because we'll have at least one pre-meeting so that you'll know what to expect. But all of the things that are on here will actually be paid for ahead of time. And the cost is probably, I'm going to say it's probably equivalent when you factor in the airfare. The cost is probably equivalent to the other 2 trips that are going to Europe. Although, are we going to? We're going to a lot of places, but we're still going to give time for you to kind of, because Rome is not a chill city these days, but if you're Italian, you're chill. So, you know, we have to give you time to kind of hang out. You know, it's kind of one of my favorite pastimes. And I have this kind of rule with my students that if someone finds me in Rome hanging out, I pay for their drink or their meal or their lunch. So there's a kind of incentive to come and try and meet with me to talk about your work. So we'll have pre-meetings. One thing that's important for anybody who's probably not US or American or European citizen, it's really tough to get visas for some of these cities now. Like Italy is really hard. So if you're thinking of going, you've got to think about visas. You're going to have insurance, cell phone prep, and I could say on the trips, because we're going to rendezvous at places to catch a bus to go to Orvieto or to go to Tivoli, the bus can't wait for you, so you can't be late. Food, 30 to 45 euros a day, depending on whether you cook in the apartment or whether you go out and how much wine you drink. No matter how much I tell my students they don't have to eat well, they always manage to eat well. You can't help it. And that's it.
Thank you very much to John Schneer for that delightful presentation. So what you've had today, and I want to thank you all for your patience, and it's great to see all of you. You've had, I think, a very tantalizing but also incomplete picture of our summer offerings. Through our website and after Reading Week, we'll make sure you get fully filled in. I know everyone's got to run back to studio and other things, or wherever you're going for Reading Week, but do we have 1 or 2 questions? Yes, these absolutely, well, if you're a master's student or undergraduate student, yes, they're absolutely counting as elective courses. Is the course available for?
Credit, non-credit, CR, NCR.
Yeah, I mean, it would be the same as any other course, depending upon where it is for degree requirements. Now, all of them, I think, are based upon hey, you've never done this before, we want to teach you how to do this. So that might be something you'd really like to do. At the same point, they're all set up so that people can do well in them, precisely because we're teaching you really carefully. But yeah, it's the same as any other course in that respect, totally.
Thank you. Oh, and one more.
Yeah.
Is speaking like a second, I mean, is there like kind of like a language requirement?
No language requirement.
Okay.
Like if you spent your life learning about Italian history and language, then tell us that in your application. But the courses are taught in English with people who speak English, like that. We had a question. The prerequisites for this are, and we've got them up on the website, so I'm going to say it right now, but let's all double check. Basically, you have to be a second, a third, or a fourth-year student, or in the master's. But there are no specific prerequisites for it. So it's basically checking that by the time the course happens, you've earned a certain number of second-year credits, so you're going into third year. And also, students who are graduating in June can still take these courses. I mean, obviously, you've already earned the degree, but you're welcome to apply and to take these courses. And some people, it's an amazing thing. So I look forward to hearing about all the amazing things you build, about all the great things you learn in Berlin and Switzerland and in Rome, and look forward to actually taking some of you to Berlin. My name's Peter Seeley. Please send me emails with questions. Either I will answer them, get John to answer them. We're going to give you more information about Switzerland. Oh, question. Oh, that. Okay, the person here has just asked the great question. Funding. So the design builds are essentially no cost or a small materials fee, so it's no. Everyone doing one of these travel courses is invited and is encouraged to apply for 2 funding sources. The Daniels faculty has travel grants, and the wider University of Toronto has the Centre for International Experience, which also has travel grants. Every year I stand up on this stage, and it's really annoying because I say, I don't know how much money they're going to give you. It's not guaranteed. But every year, Daniel students, I'm not certain, I can't promise, but usually are receiving $500, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 to cover this. So you cannot assume you'll be getting this funding, but it is likely you'll receive some support from Daniels and the University of Toronto for it. These are big, expensive numbers, I know, and usually students actually do get help with that. I'm not able to promise you anything, but you can certainly talk to students who've done the courses before. Just ask them, hey, did you get CIE funding? Did you get a Daniels Travels grant? Someone's probably going to say, like, no, I didn't. And someone else is going to say, like, yeah, I got my airfare paid for, or I got $2,000 paid for. So it's a frustrating answer, but yes, there are funding avenues to pursue with this. Okay, so again, send an email to me, to Peter Seeley. Tell your friends to write me. Tell your friends to message me on Instagram. John is around the school all the time. We can talk about this over the next couple of weeks. Applications due on March 1st. And John's going to stay here and talk about Rome, so that's great. Cool. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. And also, have a great reading week. Take care.